Okay, so the thing that I'm going to talk about today is this idea of personal ownership, extreme personal responsibility, being high agency, taking responsibility for your own life. And it's something that is fundamental in the deliberate dad, the living deliberately philosophy. And it's a bit of a personal passion of mine. So I've wanted to do a video, a podcast about this for a long time. And ultimately, it's the first step on the pathway to living deliberately. And it was the first step that I took. But it's the step that people really struggle with. This whole idea of no one's going to come here to save you, no one's going to come out of the woodwork and present the solutions, present the answer to all your problems. You've got to annoyingly do it yourself. And it took me a long time, right, to accept personal responsibility. I'm sure if you've heard my default versus deliberate sort of story of how I started on this pathway, you would have heard that it took me a long time, right? It really did. I thought that something would just appear, right? I wasn't loving my career. I wasn't loving the job. I wasn't loving the life that I was living. But I thought that an opportunity would present itself and that would present the solution to most of my problems, or I would get a new job or start a new business that would solve everything. But the older that I got, the more months and years that went by, the solution didn't appear. I realized that I was going to have to do it myself. I was going to have to take extreme ownership for my life. And again, like, this isn't saying that you're responsible for everything that happens in your life. Of course you're not, right? Like, terrible things happen to people, but it's your choice how to react to things. It's your choice to choose the action that you're going to take. Like, I've got much better results in my life. I've hit way better, bigger goals. I'm living a much more aligned life by taking extreme responsibility. And with that, there's like two ways you can sort of look at it, right? One is fearful. Like, one is with a sense of trepidation. No, everything's on me. So that's a really scary prospect for some people. But the other side of it is everything's on me, right? Like, everything's on me. Like, if I want to build a business, if I want to have an amazing marriage, if I want to be an amazing dad, then I've got the agency to do that. It's up to me to take the actions to get on that path. And for some people, that can be liberating. But I think a lot of us are stuck in that fearful part. A lot of us would rather live in autopilot. A lot of us would rather stay in default because it is a bit scarier choosing the deliberate life. It is a bit scarier not living in default and taking the high agency route. And I mentioned the term high agency a couple of times as well. It sort of is aligned with deliberate and taking personal ownership for your life. And I came across this on a few podcasts, and the one that really struck home, which I would really recommend you listen to, is George Mack on Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson, like one of my favorite podcasts. But George is this really interesting thinker. And he talks about like high agency being one of the most important ideas of the 21st century. And I would agree, right? And he talks about what I've just said, right? Like, about taking personal responsibility for your life and sort of looking at it as a positive, the fact that you've got control over it. But the way he sort of describes high agency people versus low agency people is really super interesting. It's his definition is high agency people, they happen to life, and low agency people, life happens to them. So it's a whole active versus passive. It's the default autopilot versus the deliberate taking responsibility, the taking the action, the, going out punching, right? And like, high agency people, you know who they are, right? And I think that, like, really succinct definition makes you really visualize the type of a person that you are, probably, and the type of people that you know that are high agency and low agency. when I heard that definition to begin with, I could 100% see so many people in both those camps. Less in the high agency, being completely honest. But obviously, in my line of work, I see a lot of high agency people coming through the door. Anyone that jumps on a call with me, I have huge respect for, because they are taking ownership and responsibility for their life. They are high agency people. But I would invite you to have a think about that. Like, are you happening to life, or is life happening to you? And for the high agency people that you know, that you can think of, like, what do you admire and respect about them? Because there's loads that jump to mind for me, and it makes me think about like what type of person that I want to be. And 100%, it's a high agency person, right? It's me happening to life. And the other thing that I wanted to sort of talk about, which leads on from this responsibility and agency thing, is like, that doesn't mean to say that you move away from the responsibilities that you have, right? So like, this idea that like, if something isn't working, you need to take action for it, you need to take personal responsibility for it, you need to be a high agency person. But it doesn't mean to say that, you drop everything and move forward. Like, I think, in business, there's this idea of fail fast, right? And I totally get it. And it's all around running experiments and getting the data and moving on. But there's also like the idea of perseverance and consistency, right? You have to know when it's time to fight and push forward and work really hard and take responsibility for making something work in your own life versus letting something go. So, like, one of my big passions, for anyone that knows me, is wrestling, right? I bloody love WWE. I've been to 2 WrestleManias. I, want to try and actually go to a wrestling show in Wembley this weekend. But anyway, there's a guy who isn't particularly pushed by the company, this guy called like Karrion Kross. And he makes me think of a high agency person, right? He isn't getting the TV time that he wants. The crowd's sort of chanting for him, but he's not being pushed by the company. But he's taking responsibility for his life, right? He's a high agency person. The immediate thing that I thought of, right, that most people would think of is like, why doesn't he just leave and go somewhere else? But I was watching a video that he's created, and he was talking about this, and it's not around necessarily just giving up and jumping ship. If it's something that you really want, if it's something that you really care about, then the high agency person, or the person who takes extreme ownership of their life, pushes really hard at it, right? He talks about watering your own grass. Like, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It could be. But have you actually extended your circle of control as much as you can? Have you watered your own grass? Have you fertilized it? Have you mowed it? Have you done everything that you possibly can to make that thing work? So, and like, it was really inspiring listening to him. He would rather, fight. He would rather water his own grass. He would rather, push as hard as he can within the confines of something that he really wants before he jumps ship. So don't mistake taking personal responsibility and ownership for your life and being a high agency person with jumping from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. 100% it's important to let things go when they're not working, but you also have to fight for what you actually want. You also have to have the discipline to push really hard when you know it's the right thing to do for you. So I'd invite you, right, like, think about where you could take a little bit more personal ownership in your life. Where could you be a little bit more high agency? Where could you fight? Where could you water your grass a little bit more and live a little bit more deliberately today? So I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast if you're watching it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Lots of freebies all the time. Your subscription means a lot. Thanks so much. Chat soon.